Every night, at exactly 8 o'clock, the most beautiful piano music would drift through our walls from the house next door. My 8-year-old daughter Aria, who had barely spoken since her mother died, would stop whatever she was doing and sit by her bedroom window, completely mesmerized. I thought it was just a neighbor practicing. I had no idea that knocking on that door would change our lives. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know, what's a hobby or passion that helped you through a difficult time? Drop it in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories every day. Now, let's go back to those quiet evenings when music became our lifeline. The first time I heard the piano, I was washing dishes in the kitchen, trying to pretend that the silence in our house was normal. It had been 8 months since my wife Claire died suddenly of a heart attack, and our home still felt like a museum of memories. Too quiet, too empty, too full of the echoes of laughter that would never return. Aria was upstairs in her room, probably reading or drawing, activities that had replaced the chatter and giggles that used to fill our evenings. She'd become so quiet since losing her mother, speaking only when necessary, as if words had become too precious to waste on everyday conversation. Then the music started. It was Chopin, I thought, though I wasn't sure. Claire had been the musical one in our family. She'd played violin in college and had always wanted to teach Aria piano. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, played with the kind of technical precision and emotional depth that spoke of years of training and experience. I found myself stopping mid-scrub, a soapy plate in my hands, just listening. There was something about the music that seemed to fill the empty spaces in our house, making it feel less like a tomb and more like a home again. "Daddy," Aria's voice came from behind me, so soft I almost missed it. I turned to find her, standing in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, her dark hair tousled from lying on her pillow. She looked so much like Claire in that moment that my heart ached. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Do you hear the music?" I nodded. "It's beautiful, isn't it? Someone next door must be practicing piano." Aria walked to the kitchen window that faced the house next door, a modest 2-story home with a well-maintained garden and lace curtains in the windows. I'd seen an elderly woman there occasionally, tending to her flowers, but we'd never spoken. "Can we listen?" Aria asked, pressing her small face against the glass. "Of course." We stood there together, father and daughter, listening to the mysterious pianist next door play piece after piece. For the first time in months, I saw something like peace settle over Aria's features. Her shoulders relaxed, her breathing deepened, and she seemed to be absorbing the music like a plant absorbing sunlight. The concert lasted about an hour, ending with a piece that sounded like a lullaby. As the final notes faded away, Aria turned to me with more animation than I'd seen from her in weeks. "Daddy, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." It really was, I agreed, surprised by how much the music had affected me too. Do you think I could learn to play like that?" The question caught me off guard. Claire had always wanted to teach Aria piano, but we'd never gotten around to it. There had always been soccer practice, school events, work deadlines, all the busy distractions of life that seem so trivial when you realize how little time you actually have. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I said. "We could look into piano lessons." "Could we ask the lady next door, the one who plays so beautifully?" I hesitated. I didn't even know our neighbor's name, let alone whether she gave lessons. But the hope in Aria's eyes was the first real spark of interest she'd shown in anything since her mother's death. "We could try," I said, "but we don't want to bother her if she's not interested in teaching." "Please, Daddy, Just ask." The next evening, we waited for the 8 o'clock concert. Aria had positioned herself by the living room window this time, and I found myself joining her, both of us drawn to the music like moths to a flame. Tonight's selection seemed more melancholy. Pieces that spoke of loss and longing, played with such emotional intensity that I felt tears prick at my eyes. Whoever was playing wasn't just technically skilled, they were pouring their heart into every note. "She's sad," Aria said quietly. "What makes you say that?" "The music. It sounds like how I feel sometimes, like there's a big empty space inside that hurts." I looked at my daughter with new understanding. At 8 years old, she was already learning to read the emotional language of music, to hear the stories that notes could tell when words weren't enough. Maybe that's why the music is so beautiful. Sometimes the most beautiful art comes from the deepest feelings. "Do you think she misses someone too?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "I don't know, sweetheart, but maybe that's something you could ask her if we get to meet her." The next day was Saturday, and I spent the morning working up the courage to knock on our neighbor's door. Aria had been asking about it since breakfast, and I'd run out of excuses to delay. "Remember," I told her as we walked across the yard, "if she says no, we need to respect that. Not everyone wants to teach piano, and that's okay." "I know, Daddy, but I have a good feeling about this." The house next door was charming up close, painted a soft blue with white trim, flower boxes under the windows, and a front porch with a wooden swing that looked well used. I could see why Claire had always admired it during our evening walks. I rang the doorbell and waited, my heart beating faster than seemed reasonable for such a simple request. After a moment, I heard footsteps, and the door opened to reveal a woman in her mid-60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, and intelligent gray eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She was smaller than I'd expected, probably no more than 5'4", but she carried herself with the kind of poise that suggested years of performing. She was wearing a simple cardigan and slacks, but there was something about her bearing that spoke of a more glamorous past. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cultured but cautious. "I'm Luke Brennan. This is my daughter Aria. We live next door." "Oh," the woman said, her expression softening slightly as she looked at Aria. "I'm Abigail Hartwell. It's nice to meet you both." "Miss Hartwell, we've been hearing your piano playing in the evenings, and it's absolutely beautiful. Aria here has become quite enchanted with it." Aria stepped forward, her shyness overcome by her enthusiasm. "You play like an angel. I've never heard anything so pretty." Abigail's eyes widened slightly, and I saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, perhaps, or emotion she was trying to suppress. "That's very kind of you to say," she said quietly. "Miss Hartwell, I was wondering if you might be interested in giving Aria piano lessons. She's never played before, but she's very eager to learn, and clearly you're incredibly talented."
Abigail's expression immediately became guarded. "I'm sorry, but I don't teach anymore. I haven't for quite some time." "Oh," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "I understand. We just thought we'd ask." But Aria wasn't ready to give up. "Please, Miss Hartwell, I promise I'd practice really hard, and I wouldn't bother you or anything. I just really want to learn to make music like you do." There was something in Aria's voice, a longing that went deeper than just wanting to learn piano, that seemed to reach Abigail. The older woman studied my daughter's face for a long moment, and I saw her resolve wavering. "Why do you want to learn piano?" Abigail asked gently. Arya considered the question seriously. "Because when I listen to you play, it makes the sad feeling in my chest not hurt so much. And I thought maybe if I could play too, I could help other people feel better when they're sad." Abigail's breath caught, and she gripped the doorframe slightly. "Why are you sad, sweetheart?" "My mommy died," Arya said simply. "She passed out one day, and the doctors couldn't make her come back. Daddy says she's in heaven now, but I miss her a lot." I watched Abigail's face crumple slightly, and she looked away for a moment, composing herself. When she looked back, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Losing someone you love it's the hardest thing in the world." "Did you lose someone too?" Arya asked with the directness that only children possess. "Yes, I did. Several someones, actually." "Is that why your music sounds sad sometimes?" "Yes, I think it is." Arya reached out and took Abigail's hand, a gesture so natural and compassionate that it took my breath away. "Maybe we could be sad together sometimes, and maybe you could teach me to put the sad feelings into music like you do." Abigail stared down at their joined hands, and I saw a tear slip down her cheek. "You know what?" she said finally. "I think I'd like that very much." "Really?" Arya's face lit up with the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. "Really. But I should warn you, I'm quite out of practice with teaching. It's been a long time since I've worked with a student." "That's okay," Arya said confidently. "I'm out of practice with learning piano since I've never done it before." Abigail laughed, a sound like silver bells that seemed to surprise her as much as it delighted Arya. "Well, then, I suppose we'll figure it out together. Would you like to come in and see my piano?" Arya looked at me with pleading eyes, and I nodded. "If you're sure we're not imposing." "Not at all," Abigail said, stepping aside to let us in. "I haven't had visitors in quite some time. It will be nice to have some company." The inside of Abigail's house was like stepping into another era. The furniture was elegant but comfortable, with rich fabrics and warm wood tones. The walls were lined with bookshelves and framed photographs, and everywhere there were small touches that spoke of a life well lived. Fresh flowers, beautiful art, carefully chosen objects that clearly held meaning. But the centerpiece of the living room was the piano, a magnificent black grand piano that dominated the space like a sleeping giant. It was clearly a professional instrument, the kind that cost more than most people's cars. "Oh my," I breathed. "That's incredible." "It's a Steinway," she said, with obvious pride. "I've had her for 30 years. She's been my constant companion through everything." Arya approached the piano with the reverence most people reserved for religious artifacts. "Can I touch it?" "Of course, sweetheart. Here, let me show you." Abigail sat down on the piano bench and patted the space beside her. Arya climbed up, her small hands hovering over the keys as if she was afraid they might break. "Go ahead," Abigail encouraged. "Press a key. Any key." Arya tentatively pressed middle C, and the note rang out clear and pure in the quiet room. Her eyes widened with wonder. "It's so beautiful," she whispered. "Would you like to hear how it sounds when you play a real song?" Abigail asked. Arya nodded eagerly, and Abigail began to play, the same lullaby that had ended last night's concert. But hearing it up close, watching her fingers dance across the keys with such grace and precision, was an entirely different experience. I found myself studying Abigail as she played, noticing details I hadn't seen before. Her hands were elegant,
but showed the calluses and strength of someone who'd spent decades at the keyboard. There was a small scar on her left wrist, and she wore a simple gold wedding band that caught the light as her fingers moved. But it was her expression that captivated me. When she played, her face transformed. The careful guardedness fell away, replaced by something raw and beautiful and deeply emotional. This wasn't just someone who played piano. This was someone for whom music was as essential as breathing. When the song ended, Arya clapped enthusiastically. "That was even more beautiful than when I hear it through the wall." "Thank you, sweetheart. Would you like to try playing a note or two?" For the next hour, Abigail patiently showed Arya the basics: how to sit properly, how to curve her fingers, how to find middle C. Arya absorbed every instruction like a sponge, her natural musical instincts evident in even these first tentative attempts. "She has good hands for piano," Abigail told me quietly, while Arya was experimenting with different keys. "Long fingers, natural curve, and more importantly, she has the ear for it. She can hear when something sounds right." Is that unusual for someone her age? It's not common. Musical ability is partly natural talent and partly training. But the ear, that's something you're born with. Arya has it. I watched my daughter, completely absorbed in her exploration of the keyboard, and felt a flutter of hope. Maybe this was exactly what she needed, something beautiful to focus on, something that would help her process her grief in a healthy way. "Miss Hartwell, if you're serious about teaching her, what would you charge for lessons?" Abigail was quiet for a moment, watching Arya play. "I don't want your money, Luke," she said finally. "I couldn't ask you to teach her for free. Your time is valuable, and clearly you're incredibly skilled." "You're not asking," Abigail said with a small smile. "I'm offering. The truth is, I haven't touched this piano for anything but my evening sessions in over a year. Having a reason to really play again, to share music with someone who appreciates it the way Arya does, that's worth more to me than any payment you could offer." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Besides," she added, her voice growing softer, "I think Arya and I might have more in common than just a love of music. Sometimes the best healing happens when broken people help each other." That evening, Arya could talk nothing about her piano lesson and Miss Hartwell's beautiful house and how excited she was to learn to play real songs. It was the most animated I'd seen her since before Claire's passing, and I felt a weight I didn't even know I'd been carrying begin to lift from my shoulders.
"Daddy," Arya said as I tucked her into bed, "do you think Mommy would be happy that I'm learning piano?" "I think Mommy would be thrilled," I said honestly. "She always wanted to teach you herself." "Maybe she sent Miss Hartwell to us," Arya said thoughtfully, "like a musical angel." I kissed her forehead, my heart full for the first time in months. "Maybe she did, sweetheart. Maybe she did." Over the next few weeks, Arya's piano lessons became the highlight of both our days. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock, she would practically skip across the yard to Abigail's house, clutching her beginner's music book and bubbling with excitement. I would pick her up an hour later to find her glowing with accomplishment, eager to show me the new piece she'd learned or the technique Abigail had taught her. But more than that, I noticed changes in Arya that went beyond music. She was talking more, smiling more, and the heavy sadness that had settled over her after Claire's death seemed to be lifting, note by note. "Miss Hartwell says I have natural rhythm," Arya announced, Onabing over dinner, "and she's going to teach me a song that her daughter used to love." I paused, my fork halfway to my mouth. "Her daughter?" "Uh-huh. She showed me a picture. Her name was Caroline, and she had dark hair like me. Miss Hartwell said she would have been 20 now if she hadn't gone to heaven." My heart clenched. I'd suspected that Abigail had experienced loss. The emotion in her music made that clear, but hearing it confirmed through my daughter's innocent words hit me unexpectedly hard. "Did she tell you what happened to Caroline?"
She said Caroline was born too early and couldn't stay, but she said that every time she plays piano, she feels like Caroline is listening, and that makes her happy sad. Happy sad. It was such a perfect description of grief that I had to blink back tears. That sounds like a beautiful way to remember someone you love. That's what I told her, and I said that when I play piano, I feel like Mommy is listening too. After dinner, as I was cleaning up the kitchen, I found myself thinking about Abigail. I'd been so focused on how the piano lessons were helping Aria that I hadn't considered what this arrangement might mean for our neighbor. She was clearly a woman who had experienced profound loss, yet she was opening her heart to my grieving daughter with remarkable generosity. The next day, I decided to do something I'd been thinking about for weeks. I stopped by the local bakery and picked up a selection of pastries, and then knocked on Abigail's door just as Aria's lesson was ending. "Luke," Abigail said, opening the door with surprise, "you're early." "Actually, I brought coffee and pastries. I thought maybe we could all sit and talk for a bit if you have time." Abigail's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "That sounds wonderful. Aria was just showing me how well she's mastered Für Elise. Would you like to hear?" For the next hour, we sat in Abigail's living room eating Danish pastries and listening to Aria play the pieces she'd learned. But more than that, we talked, really talked, for the first time since we'd met. I learned that Abigail had been the principal pianist for the City Symphony for 25 years, that she had traveled the world performing, and that music had been the center of her life since she was barely older than Aria. "I started playing when I was 5, she told us. My mother was a piano teacher, and she said I took to it like a duck to water. By the time I was 12, I was performing in recitals. By 18, I was accepted to Juilliard." "Wow," Aria breathed. "You went to the most famous music school in the world?" "I did, and that's where I met my husband, James. He was a violinist, and we fell in love over a Brahms sonata." "That's so romantic," Aria sighed. Abigail smiled, but I could see the sadness creeping into her eyes. "It was. We had 35 wonderful years together. We traveled, we performed, we built a beautiful life centered around music." "What happened to him?" I asked gently. "Aneurysm, 6 years ago. Completely unexpected. He was only 62. Abigail's voice grew quiet. "One day we were planning a trip to Vienna, and the next day he was gone." "I'm so sorry," I said, meaning it deeply. "And Caroline?" Aria asked with a directness that sometimes made me cringe, but that Abigail seemed to appreciate. "Caroline was our miracle baby," Abigail said, her voice growing even softer. "We'd tried for years to have children, and when I finally got pregnant at 41, we were over the moon. But she was born at 26 weeks. She lived for 3 beautiful days, and then—" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Aria climbed off her chair and went to sit beside Abigail on the sofa, taking her hand in the same natural, compassionate gesture she'd used that first day. "I'm sorry your baby went to heaven," Aria said simply, "but I bet she's with my mommy now, and they're taking care of each other." Abigail's eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed Aria's hand. "That's a beautiful thought, sweetheart. I'd like to believe that's true." "It is true," Aria said, with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "And I bet they both love listening to you play piano." As I watched this exchange, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about piano lessons anymore. This was about 3 people who had experienced devastating loss, finding comfort and healing in each other's company. "Abigail," I said impulsively, "would you like to have dinner with us sometime? Nothing fancy, just dinner." She looked surprised, then touched. "I'd like that very much, but only if you let me cook. I haven't had anyone to cook for in years, and I miss it." "Deal," I said, and Aria clapped her hands with excitement. The following Saturday, Abigail came over for dinner, bringing homemade lasagna and a chocolate cake that made Arya's eyes widen with delight. But more than the food, she brought stories, tales of her performing days, funny anecdotes about famous musicians she'd worked with, and gentle memories of James and Caroline that she shared like precious gifts. "Tell us about the time you played for the president," Arya begged, having heard a snippet of this story during one of her lessons. "Oh, that was terrifying," Abigail laughed. "It was a state dinner, and I was so nervous that my hands were shaking. James had to give me a pep talk backstage." "What did he say?" "He said, 'Abby, you're not playing for the president. You're playing for the music. The music doesn't care about politics or protocol. It just wants to be beautiful.' And he was right. The moment I started playing, everything else faded away." "That's what happens to me when I play now," Arya said. "Everything gets quiet except the music." "That's exactly right, sweetheart. That's how you know you're really connecting with the music." The way Abigail looked at Arya really struck me. There was such tenderness in her expression, such obvious affection, that it was clear she'd grown genuinely attached to my daughter. And Arya, for her part, was blossoming under Abigail's attention in a way that made my heart both soar and ache. "Miss Hartwell," Arya said as we were finishing dessert, "do you ever get lonely in your big house all by yourself?" "Arya," I started to chide, but Abigail held up a hand. "It's okay, Luke. It's a fair question." She turned to Arya. "Yes, sweetheart, I do get lonely sometimes, especially in the evenings when the house gets very quiet."
"You could come have dinner with us more often," Arya suggested. "Daddy's not a very good cook, but he tries really hard." "Hey," I protested, making Arya giggle. "I'd like that very much," Abigail said, smiling at both of us, "if your daddy doesn't mind having an old lady around." "You're not old," Arya said firmly. "You were just experienced, like a really good wine." Abigail burst out laughing. "Where on earth did you hear that expression?" "Daddy says it about his favorite jazz albums. He says they get better with age." "Well, I suppose that's a compliment," Abigail said. As the weeks turned into months, Abigail became a regular part of our lives. She joined us for dinner twice a week, came to Arya's school concerts, and even helped with homework when I was working late during tax season. But it was the small, everyday moments that really showed how seamlessly she had become part of our family. The way she remembered that Arya liked her sandwiches cut diagonally. The way she always had a Band-Aid ready when Arya scraped her knee playing in the yard. The way she listened, really listened, when Arya talked about her day, her dreams, her occasional moments of missing her mother. "You know," I told her one evening as we sat on my back porch while Arya played in the yard, "you've been incredible with her. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Abigail said softly. "Arya has given me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Purpose, joy, a reason to get up in the morning that goes beyond just existing. I was drowning in my grief, Luke. After James died, and especially after I lost Caroline, I felt like my life was over. Music became painful instead of beautiful. I stopped performing, stopped teaching, stopped really living. And now? Now I have a little girl who looks at me like I hung the moon when I teach her a new piece. I have someone to cook for, someone to worry about, someone to love." Her voice grew thick with emotion. "Arya saved me, Luke. You both did." I felt my own throat tighten. "You saved us, too. Arya was disappearing into her grief, and I didn't know how to reach her. You gave her back her voice, her joy, her music." "We saved each other," she said simply. "That's what families do." The word hung in the air between us. Family. Because that's what we'd become, wasn't it? Not through blood or marriage, but through choice and love and the simple decision to show up for each other every day. It was around this time that Arya started asking questions that made my heart race. "Daddy," she said one evening as I was tucking her into bed, "do you think Miss Hartwell gets lonely sleeping in her big house all by herself?" "I'm sure she does sometimes, sweetheart. But she has us now, and that helps." "But we don't live with her. She still has to wake up alone and go to sleep alone." I wasn't sure where this conversation was heading, but I had a feeling I should tread carefully. "That's true, but lots of people live alone, and they're okay. Mommy used to say that families should take care of each other, and Miss Hartwell is family now, right?" "She's definitely part of our family," I agreed. "So shouldn't we take better care of her?" "What do you mean?" Arya was quiet for a moment, clearly working through her thoughts. "What if something happened to her in the middle of the night? What if she got sick or fell down? No one would know to help her." The concern in her voice was so genuine, so mature for an 8-year-old, that it took my breath away. "That's very thoughtful of you to worry about her, sweetheart. I think she should live with us," Arya announced. "Then we could take care of her, and she could take care of us, and no one would have to be lonely anymore." I felt my heart skip a beat. "Arya, that's a very sweet idea, but it's complicated. Miss Hartwell has her own house, her own life. But she said her house feels too big and empty now, and our house feels too quiet without Mommy. Maybe if we put them together, they'd both feel just right." The logic was so simple, so pure, that I almost laughed. But there was something in Arya's suggestion that resonated deeper than I wanted to admit. Our house did feel too quiet, too empty, and from what Abigail had shared, her house felt the same way. "Let me think about it, okay?" I said finally. "Okay, but Daddy..." "Yes?" "I think Mommy would like Miss Hartwell. I think she'd want us to take care of her." That night, I lay awake thinking about Arya's words. The truth was, I'd grown incredibly fond of Abigail over the past few months. She was intelligent, kind, funny, and she loved my daughter with a fierceness that took my breath away. But more than that, she understood grief in a way that most people didn't. She knew what it was like to lose someone who was the center of your world, and she never tried to rush Arya or me through the process of healing. But the idea of asking her to move in with us felt enormous, complicated by questions I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. What would people think? What would it mean for our relationship? The answer came 2 weeks later, in the most unexpected way. I was at work when my phone rang. It was Arya's school. "Mr. Brennan, this is Mrs. Patterson from Riverside Elementary. Arya is fine, but we need you to come pick her up. She's been asking for Miss Hartwell, and when we told her we couldn't reach her, she became quite upset." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean you couldn't reach her?" "Arya gave us Miss Hartwell's number as an emergency contact, but there's no answer. Arya is worried that something has happened to her." I was out the door before Mrs. Patterson finished speaking. 20 minutes later, I was at Arya's school, finding her red-eyed and anxious in the nurse's office. "Daddy," she cried, throwing herself into my arms. "Something's wrong with Miss Hartwell. She always answers her phone, but she's not answering today." "Okay, sweetheart, let's go check on her," I said, trying to keep my own worry out of my voice. We drove to Abigail's house, and I felt my anxiety spike when I saw that her car was in the driveway, but the house looked dark and quiet. I knocked on the front door, then rang the bell repeatedly. No answer. "Miss Hartwell," Arya called out. "It's us. Are you okay?" Finally, I heard a weak voice from inside. "Luke, Arya, I'm here, but I can't get to the door." My heart pounded as I tried the door handle. It was unlocked, thank God.
We found Abigail on the living room floor beside her piano, conscious, but clearly in pain. "I fell this morning," she said weakly. "I think I broke my wrist, and I can't seem to get up. I've been here for hours." "Oh, Miss Hartwell," Arya cried, kneeling beside her. "I'm calling an ambulance," I said, already dialing 911. The next few hours were a blur of emergency rooms, x-rays, and worried waiting. Abigail had indeed broken her wrist and had a mild concussion from hitting her head when she fell. The doctors wanted to keep her overnight for observation. "I'm so sorry," she said as we sat in her hospital room. "I didn't mean to scare you both." "Don't apologize," I said firmly. "We're just glad you're okay. But Abigail, what if we hadn't come looking for you? What if you'd been there all night?" "I don't want to think about that," she said quietly.
Arya, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "This is exactly what I was worried about," she said, her voice small but determined. "Miss Hartwell, you can't live alone anymore. It's not safe." "Sweetheart, I'll be more careful." "No," Arya interrupted, which was unusual for her. "You need to come live with us. Daddy and I talked about it, and we want you to be part of our family for real." I felt my cheeks burn. We hadn't exactly talked about it, but looking at Abigail lying in that hospital bed, I realized that Arya was absolutely right. "Arya's right," I said, surprising myself with how certain I sounded. "Abigail, we've been dancing around this for months, but the truth is, you're already family. You're the grandmother Arya never had, and you're—" I paused, searching for the right words. "You're the friend I never knew I needed. We want you to come live with us, not as a guest, not temporarily, but as family." Abigail's eyes filled with tears. "Luke, I couldn't ask something like that. You have your own life, your own routines." "You wouldn't be asking," I said firmly. "You'd be completing something that's been missing. Our house has felt too empty since Claire died, and your house has felt too empty since James died. Maybe together they'd feel like home again." "Please, Miss Hartwell," Arya pleaded, taking Abigail's uninjured hand. "I promise I'll keep my room clean, and I'll practice piano every day, and I'll help you with anything you need." Abigail looked between us, her expression cycling through surprise, hope, and something that looked like relief. Finally, she smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her since we'd found her on the floor. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'd love to live with you both." Arya let out a whoop of joy that made the nurses in the hallway smile, and I felt a weight I didn't even know I'd been carrying lift from my shoulders. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. We decided that Abigail would move into our guest room, which was on the first floor and had its own bathroom. She would keep her house for now, renting it out to help with expenses, but her piano, her beloved Steinway, would come to live with us. "Are you sure it will fit?" Abigail asked anxiously as the piano movers measured our living room. "We'll make it fit," I said. "A house isn't a home without music." The day the piano arrived was like Christmas morning for Arya. She supervised the entire process, making sure the movers were careful with every inch of the precious instrument. When it was finally in place by the large window in our living room, she ran her hands over the keys with reverence. "Now it's really home," she announced. Abigail's first night in our house was emotional for all of us. At dinner, she seemed almost overwhelmed by the simple pleasure of having someone to cook for and eat with. "I'd forgotten how wonderful it is to have someone ask about your day," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Well, get used to it," Arya said cheerfully. "We are very nosy in this family." That night, as I was saying goodnight to Arya, she threw her arms around my neck with unusual intensity. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered. "For what, sweetheart?" "For making us a real family again. I know Mommy can't come back, but having Miss Hartwell here makes the house feel full of love." I felt tears prick at my eyes. You're the one who made this happen, Arya. You saw what we needed before I did. Do you think Mommy would be happy? I thought about Claire, about her generous heart and her belief that family was about love, not blood. I think Mommy would be really happy that we found each other. The adjustment period was surprisingly smooth. Abigail slipped into our routines as if she'd always been there. She was up early, making coffee and reading the newspaper. She helped Arya get ready for school, braided her hair, and made sure she had everything she needed. In the evenings, she helped with homework, cooked dinner, and filled our house with music. But it was the small moments that really showed how perfectly she fit into our lives. The way she remembered that I liked my coffee black, but Arya preferred hot chocolate. The way she left little notes in Arya's lunchbox. The way she sat with me on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing, while Arya played in the yard. You know, I told her one evening about a month after she'd moved in, I can't remember what our house felt like before you were here. It felt lonely, Arya called out from where she was lying on the grass looking at the stars. But now it feels perfect. Abigail smiled, her eyes bright with contentment. It feels perfect to me too. 6 months later, we were preparing for Arya's first piano recital. Abigail had been working with her on a piece by Debussy, Clair de Lune, and Arya had been practicing diligently every day. I'm nervous, Arya confided the night before the recital. What if I mess up? Then you keep playing, Abigail said gently. Music isn't about perfection, sweetheart. It's about sharing something beautiful with other people. Even if you make a mistake, the beauty is still there. Will you be proud of me even if I'm not perfect? I'm already proud of you, Abigail said, pulling Arya into a hug. Not because of how well you play piano, but because of who you are. You're kind and brave, and you have the biggest heart of anyone I know. The recital was held in the school auditorium, and I sat in the front row with Abigail, both of us beaming with pride as Arya walked onto the stage in her new blue dress. She looked so small behind the large piano, but when she began to play, she seemed to grow before our eyes. The music that flowed from her fingers was beautiful, not perfect, but filled with emotion and genuine love for the piece. I could see Abigail's influence in every note, not just in the technical skill, but in the way Arya connected with the music, the way she let it tell a story. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Arya curtsied, her face glowing with accomplishment, and I saw her eyes find us in the audience. She waved, and Abigail blew her a kiss. That's my granddaughter, Abigail whispered, and I felt my heart swell with love for this woman who had chosen to love my daughter as her own. After the recital, we went out for ice cream to celebrate. Arya chattered excitedly about the performance, about the other students, about how much fun it had been to share her music with an audience. Miss Hartwell, she said suddenly, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Would it be okay if I called you Grandma Abby? I mean, you're not my real grandma, but you feel like my real grandma, and I don't have any other grandmas, and... Abigail's eyes filled with tears, and she reached across the table to take Arya's hand. She said, I would be honored to be your Grandma Abby. She said, her voice thick with emotion. There's nothing in the world I'd like more. Really? Really. You know, I never got to be a grandmother before. I always wondered what it would feel like, and now I know. It feels like the greatest privilege in the world.
That night, as I was tucking Arya into bed, she was still glowing with happiness from the day's events. Daddy, do you think we could have a family picture taken with you and me and Grandma Abby? I think that's a wonderful idea. And can we send a copy to Mommy in heaven so she knows we're okay and we found each other? I felt my throat tighten with emotion. I think Mommy already knows, sweetheart. But yes, we can do that. 2 years later, our family portrait sat on the mantelpiece. 3 people who had found each other through loss and music and love. Aria was now 10, tall and confident, her fingers flying over the piano keys with increasing skill and artistry. Abigail was healthier and happier than she'd been in years, her purpose renewed by the joy of watching Aria grow and learn. And I had found something I hadn't even known I was looking for. Not just a mother figure for Aria, but a true partner in the adventure of raising a child. "You know what I realized today?" Abigail said one evening as we sat listening to Aria practice a new piece. "What's that?" "I spent so many years thinking my story was over, but I was wrong. I didn't know that life would surprise me and that there was still so much to live and hope for." Aria finished her piece and turned around on the piano bench, grinning at us. "Are you getting all mushy again?" "Maybe a little," she admitted. "Good," she said, coming over to squeeze between us on the couch. "I like it when we're mushy. It means we're happy." As we sat there together listening to the evening sounds of our neighborhood, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. It had started with mysterious piano music drifting through our walls, music that had called to a grieving little girl and led her to exactly what she needed. But more than that, it had led all of us to what we needed. The music had brought us together, but it was love that made us family. And as Aria snuggled closer to both of us, I knew that Claire would be proud of the life we'd built, the healing we'd found, and the beautiful music that filled our home every single day. An absolutely beautiful story about how music can heal broken hearts and bring together the family we never knew we needed. What's a hobby or passion that helped you through a difficult time? Share your stories in the comments below. If this story of Luke, Aria, and Grandma Abby touched your heart and reminded you of the healing power of music and chosen family, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories about love, loss, and the connections that save us. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.